Hello, everybody. Jenny here. Super excited to have you here for another Monday Morning Moxie. Today, I want to talk about this concept of working on things. So, the first question I have for you is think about all of the different things in your life, in your business that you're currently working on. Okay, do you have that? Everything in your head. Now, I would like you to stop working on that. Now, I know that's silly. I'm being a little cheeky here, but this idea of working on things sounds like a good thing. It's just a colloquial phrase of how we describe what is on our plate, all the different projects we've got going on, all the different self improvement efforts that we've got going on. We're always working on different things. And I've realized in the almost 20 years I've been doing this work that this idea of working on things is actually language we need to look at. And this is not just semantics, I promise, though I'm a big sucker for semantics. This idea of what are you working on is just a recipe for holding yourself back in perfectionism and procrastination and for things taking up way more time than they necessarily need to. So what I want you to do is instead of focusing on all the things that you're working on, keep using the air quotes there, is I want you to start focusing on crossing finish lines. So let me back up a little bit. Every single week in our Make It Happen weekly sessions, we invite people to figure out and brainstorm what are all the things they want to do in the upcoming week. What are the things that feel like these are the tasks and the projects and the endeavors that feel like these are the things that are moving the needle towards where I want to go and towards the things that I'm working on, if you will. And we want them to pull back and make sure that once they've kind of brainstormed this list of these are the things that, based on what I've got going on in the world, I would like to accomplish next week. We invite them to rewrite everything on there as a finish line. And as a finish line, meaning it's cross-offable. You know whether or not you did the thing. I think this is really important because far too often we have all of these projects of things that we're working on without clear ideas of what are the different finish lines. And I don't mean the ultimate finish line of this project is done and dusted forever. In our online businesses, we have a lot of projects that are never, ever going to be done and dusted. For example, YouTubing. I'm never going to be finished with YouTubing. I have now produced all the YouTube videos that I need to do, and it is complete, right? That's not a thing. However, what we can do is by living our life one week at a time, we can figure out in this particular week, what are the finish lines I want to cross in terms of my YouTube channel, in terms of my content creation, in terms of growing my business and my lead generation or whatever the different projects are. When you start thinking about finish lines, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, how can I make sure that I'm making some tangible progress on this in a way that feels powerful to me, right? That feels like, okay, I feel accomplished. And when we're talking about finish lines, what it's doing isn't necessarily making it small. It's just making it clear. So one of the things that I like to do when I talk about finish lines is add the phrase "at least" to the front of it. And so when you're trying to figure out okay, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do in terms of lead generation this upcoming week, but this week I need to focus on lead generation. I need some more leads. Cool. Even if you don't know what the specific task is, you can say, well, I'm going to spend at least 2 hours next week figuring out my next lead magnet. Now, that same thing that isn't completely formed and isn't specific yet is a finish line because you know whether or not you gave it 2 hours. You know whether or not you sat down for 2 hours to give it that much thought. Another way of thinking about this is writing a book. Okay, a book is eventually finite, although I'm working on the second edition of a book right now, so maybe it's not. But even a project that's bigger and meatier that does feel like it has a finite outcome, each week we want to have an idea of what are the finish lines we're crossing to keep moving the needle towards that thing. So we're not just working on a book and sitting down going, okay, what do I feel like working on? But that we have a distinct finish line, that we know what that looks like. Using that at least language, that could look like a lot of different things. I'm going to write at least one more chapter. I'm going to edit at least another 500 words, or I'm going to spend at least 20 hours devoted to my book. Notice that it's not about making it necessarily small. This is one of the things in the productivity space that drives me absolutely batty. I don't think that for something to be productive, it needs to be bite-sized necessarily. It just needs to be clear. And you need to feel like, okay, this is a finish line I can commit to. This feels reasonable and realistic for me. The other reason I want us to stop working on things is that it's so nebulous that we feel like, okay, I poked at it, I dabbled with that thing, but I didn't actually get to some kind of sense of accomplishment. You can feel like you're dabbling, but you're not doing, you're not actually moving something. And maybe you think, if I just keep poking at it, keep showing up to it and dabble with it enough, something magical will happen. But let's be honest, when you're in that space and you're just working on everything, you're allowing it to get bigger than it necessarily needs to be. And if you're like any of the clients that we work with, impatiently ambitious entrepreneurs, these things really matter to you. And when they matter to you and you're working on them and you're dabbling with them and you're playing with these ideas, perfectionism just like welcomes itself to the party, right? Suddenly we're worried about, is it perfect enough? Is it like shine from the top of this Chrysler building kind of situation? Is it like just crystal and clear and original enough and special enough? Or is it without any typos or any possibility that somebody might criticize this thing? Or is it, before I put this out there, I got to keep working on it because if I work on it long enough, then it's going to be successful right out of the gate, because that's another flavor of perfectionism, of making sure it's super duper successful right out of the gate, or it was obviously just a failure. That idea of like working on things sounds good, but it's also exhausting because you don't get that sense of accomplishment. You don't get those kind of measured moments of like, okay, I feel like I made a difference on this bigger project. I feel like I made a dent in my YouTube channel because my finish line was, this is so meta, but my finish line was doing the Monday Morning Moxie on this particular week. And that is done and dusted. And that feels really good. And I can cross that off of my to-do list. And maybe I'm going to spend another 2 hours figuring out the next show that we want to start doing in our YouTube channel. And I spent those 2 hours. Meredith and I talked about this, and that feels really good. I feel like in our entrepreneurial space, there is a enormous number of things that we want to be doing, things that we plan on doing, things that we're fixing to do if you're Southern, right? Like things that we should be doing, that we could be doing. I say this all the time to my clients. It's the shoulds aren't the real problem for us. It's the coulds that are insidious, because there's so many things we could be doing for our business. And that's exhausting. So we end up like working on 7,000 different things. Like, be honest with yourself right now. How many different projects or ideas or initiatives or offers are you currently working on? And how many of those are actually getting the traction that you feel accomplished? So many of the entrepreneurs we work with feel like all of the time they're constantly working. I feel like I'm constantly working. I feel like I'm always focused on the business. There's always something more I want to do. As soon as I get close to a finish line, there's like 6 other things that I'm thinking about I could also be doing. And so it can be incredibly exhausting. It's Brandy here says it right here. Working on does feel exhausting. It's like the language of the perpetual grind. Exactly. Like we're turning this business of ours, which many of us got into so that we could, call the shots. But we're turning it into that perpetual grind that Brandy's talking about. It can be very exhausting. And yet, how many times do you kind of finish a Friday and you're like, wow, I worked on a gajillion things and I have no idea what to show for it. I feel like I worked to the bone. I feel like I worked 16-hour days all week, and I couldn't tell you what I actually accomplished. That is not what we want you to be doing. Like we're in the business of helping entrepreneurs actually follow through on what matters to them. But how do you know you followed through if you're just working on things and not crossing finish lines? That's my long-winded point today. So what I want you to do is think about, for this upcoming week, what are the finish lines you want to cross that would feel particularly significant to you in some way? Like think about all these different projects you want to do. You and I have the same amount of hours this week to do them in. But of course, we all have different things on our plate. So given what we got going on this upcoming week in particular, looking at this week, what feels reasonable? What feels realistic of what you can actually accomplish that would feel like you're moving the needle on some of these big, big things that you want to do? What are those finish lines that you can cross that are going to feel like tangible and specific and like, oh, this isn't just an idea anymore? I don't really know why, but the podcast keeps coming up. Meredith and I are producing a podcast right now. And so, like, producing a podcast can be something like, okay, I want to grow my podcast. That's working on. I'm working on growing my podcast. But a finish line might be very specific. I'm going to record at least X number of episodes. I'm going to produce the cover art. I am going to send out at least 2 emails about it. I'm going to post on social media at least 4 times about it. Like, you see where I'm going? Like, adding this at least language allows you to make that podcast thing something that you feel accomplished on. So instead of saying, oh, I really need to work on my podcast some more, you can say, okay, this week I have the cover art, 2 more episodes, and another idea for another podcast or whatever. Like, you have all these specific finish lines you've crossed. So it feels different. Now, Meredith is pointing out in the chat, notice that she said significant and not important. This is really, really, really important. I'm glad you brought this up, Meredith, because I feel like when we're talking about like planning for our week, we're all very stuck in that kind of 20th century mindset of how you're supposed to make sure everything is important and urgent. I don't know if you remember this, but there's this thing called the Eisenhower matrix. How fancy. That was very popular. It was popularized in, I want to say, the 90s by the 7 Habits of Success. I'm totally messing up the title of that. The Covey book, or the Stephen Covey book. And he talks about, like, is it important? Is it urgent? There was like this quadrant you were supposed to figure out, like, are you only doing things that are urgent, like a phone that's ringing, versus things that are important, and all of these things. I find that to be utterly exhausting. And I get why that's a thing in corporate America, but for us entrepreneurs, like, no, it's just not cute. What I want to encourage you to do is instead say, is this significant to me? Does it matter? Does this matter to me? I bet that there's a ton of things that you're working on that don't really matter to you, that you're spending a great deal of time on because you feel like, well, this is something that every entrepreneur should or could do. And the things that are super important, super significant to you, the things that really matter to you, that you would like to feel like, okay, I accomplished these things. I'm moving in the direction of who I want to be as a human, as an entrepreneur, as a wife, as a fill in all the different roles that you play. Those are the things that are not getting the love. And it's because you're working on those things while you're crossing other finish lines that don't really fit. Right? And exactly. So that's the point. The question is, does this really matter to me? And if it doesn't matter to you, then we don't need to cross that finish line anymore. So that's my Monday Morning Moxie for you this week. I want to give you this challenge of thinking in terms of finish lines instead of thinking in terms of what you're working on. I don't want you to just feel busy. I want you to feel accomplished. I'm going to say that again. I don't want you to just feel like I was really busy this week, or I worked really hard. I have sweat on my brow. I want you to feel like when your head hits the pillow at night, that you are crystal clear on what you accomplished, and you know exactly the finish lines that you're going to accomplish tomorrow. Like, what are those finish lines you're going to cross? I use that language very specifically because it's very different from like, here's all the stuff I got done, and here's the things I accomplished. Here's the finish lines I crossed. You know that finish line when you cross it in a race and how wonderful it feels. It's an accomplishment. It feels like an achievement. It's something that you made happen. And that's really the key. Oh, thank you for quoting me there. I like deciding that you're not just going to have another week where you work your butt off, but you're going to have a week where you actually followed through on the things that matter to you, simply by crossing finish lines that are significant to you in some way, changes everything. So give it a go, give it a week, see how it goes. Might just change your life. I promise it's pretty spectacular. Think in terms of finish lines and let me know how it goes. Come back and leave me a comment. Share this video with somebody else who needs to hear it. And until next time, keep making things happen no matter what. Bye now.